Alright guys, welcome to the Fight Night Du Plessis versus Usman full card breakdown. How you guys doing? Yes, I will do a recap. I will do it at the end, not the start. This card is not going to take long to break down. It is a small card, and a lot of these fights are super low level anyways. But yeah, we'll get through it, and then we'll do the recap after that. My thing is frozen, so hopefully... Oh, there we go. Now it finally... Best day in the server history. Yes, it has been an interesting day. Isn't this card kind of... yeah, it's not great. Or they added a new fight. Yeah, so did I. I know nothing about either fighter, though, so we'll have to skip that. Everyone join the server. Yes, this is an early promo, but we've had an interesting last few days in the server. A lot of pullouts, yeah. BSD or Torres, that's a tough one. I'd probably lean BSD, but I really don't know. Patty or Charles? Charles. He'll just knock him out on the feet, most likely. Benji versus... Oh boy. This is going to be interesting, Remy. What is your prediction? Thoughts on Hooker versus Green? I think Hooker's still too much for Green, because there's definitely a pattern in the guys that Green is beating, in that like they have very clear weaknesses, or they're just extremely overhyped prospects. Like, even though I officially picked McKinney, I think most of you watched my prediction and were like, McKinney kind of sucks. Green could definitely win that, but it's going to be bad. That's my prediction. Fair enough. McMillan versus Montez feels like a betting trap. I know exactly what you mean, and we will get to that. We'll wait like 2 more minutes, and then we will start. Hooker versus Green 2026. Yeah, it's tough. Like, everyone in lightweight is ancient. Dustin actually filled in on that prediction. Fair. Women's amateur heavyweight minimum weight is 170 kilograms. Okay. Problem is Dan Hooker doesn't have power, and he's very damage prone now. I think Bobby Hooker. I think that people are slightly overestimating Bobby now because he just fought a few cans in a row, to be honest. But I do get what you mean. I wouldn't count Bobby out of that fight. I think that Hooker is just too technical of a kicker, and I don't think Bobby really has the wrestling to get past it. I have no idea, Wonder, who would win that. Yeah, I saw the new fight got added. I just don't know who they are, so I can't do much about that, to be honest. Seeing the BSD fight genuinely made me question his fight IQ and maybe wonder how he... how did he beat Rufy? Does Rufy really hate pressure that much? Well, 2 things. Yes, Rufy does hate pressure that much, and also he just fought a lot more intelligently against Rufy. We'll get to that, though. Placing Benji bets this week. Alright, we'll get into the breakdown, and then we'll get pretty quickly to all the fights you guys are interested in, since, as I was saying, this isn't exactly a depth-heavy card, to say the least. So, starting with Melisano versus Barbosa. So, for those of you who don't know, Melisano was on The Ultimate Fighter, was actually favored to win The Ultimate Fighter, and got absolutely destroyed in the first round. So, somehow she got the short notice call-up to fight Diony Barbosa in what is an incredibly sacrificial lamb fight. I will still break it down because there is stuff to break down, but it feels kind of stupid, not gonna lie. So starting with Melisano, she's basically a pure boxer. She throws in combinations, usually just 1-2 or 1-2-3. She's very big for the weight classes she's in, so she usually just tries to stay out of range. She has no real nuance. If you close the distance, she's very hittable. If you get her to the ground, she's absolutely helpless. She usually fights at straw weight. She's fighting at flyweight here. She is actually still going to be the larger fighter. She has a very long reach for WMMA, but she's not going to have as big of a size advantage as she's used to by any means. Moving on to Barbosa. Barbosa is also like pretty well rounded, but has a bias towards the grappling. On the feet, she throws a lot of jabs and tries to stick to combinations otherwise. She's good at getting takedowns via throws or body locks. She will shoot on a double leg to set it up at times, though. On the ground, she's looking to jump on submission. She doesn't really use ground and pound at all, though, which is definitely a missing part of her game. Barbosa should just close the distance, get a body lock, get her down and sub her. There's no real nuance here. I don't think Barbosa is going to struggle with the size. That's the only real argument for Melisano here. But Barbosa should get the fight down, and then Melisano's completely lost. So, yeah, Barbosa by sub. Moving on to Alvin Hines versus RJ Harris. This one's actually a little more interesting. So, starting with Harris. Harris is basically an unathletic version of Cyril Gane. He tends to keep his hands low and just pop in and out of range. He'll lunge in with a jab, 1-2, stuff like that. He is very fluid, and his defense is movement-oriented. He does actually really like going to submissions. He doesn't have the best wrestling to get a fight down, but if you shoot on him, or if you even lower your head, he will try to snap you down and go for standing guillotines and so on. He's definitely very hittable, though, if you put together combinations, because movement is his only defense, and his movement is not the most athletic movement, as we said. Moving on to Hines. Hines is a well-rounded, aggressive fighter. He really tries to pressure forwards and lands quick 1-2s and such. He does have heavy hands and more speed than your average heavyweight. He shoots on blast double legs. If he gets the fight down, he will go to submissions from on top. He has a very short reach for heavyweight. So against longer opponents, he can get tagged coming in. So one thing about Hines is he did pop for PEDs after his last fight, and it's hard to say how much worse he's going to look being off PEDs, because that's usually a big thing for heavyweight. They look okay on the regional scene. All of a sudden, they pop for PEDs in the UFC, and their physique just melts. I'm blanking on his name. The guy who got knocked out every fight. Lucas Bresky, right? You look at the dude on the regional scene, and he's absolutely ripped, extremely durable, has one punch knockout power, goes to the UFC, and he's just a fat blob who can't do anything. So that very much could happen with Alvin Hines here. I will also say, even though Hines is probably technically the better fighter, the reach difference, it's pretty insane. And that's why Harris just got lost in his last fight after 2 minutes. His opponent realized he could just jab him from range nonstop, and there's absolutely nothing Hines could do. Harris has a slightly longer reach than his last opponent, so I feel like we could see the same thing, where Harris just realized, well, I could just stay out of range and pop this guy repetitively, and I could either take a decision or just damage him enough to make him give up a sub here. So I am going to actually pick Harris by submission here. I think that eventually Hines will take a bad shot and run into the guillotine, but it's heavyweight, low level. You guys know, take that with a grain of salt, obviously. Moving on to Alden Correa versus Stuart Nicole. I'll probably put up polls in the next fight. No one's going to pick Nicole here, so we'll just break down the fight and go from there. So, starting with Correa, he is a relatively well-rounded fighter. We got to see him get the massive upset against Costa for his debut, but there were some weird elements there. Costa kind of injured himself, so I'm not going to say that that was a pure skill thing. He strikes a lot on the outside. He stays fundamental, kind of just keeps using his jab, leg kick, and feints. He eventually will commit to the 1-2. His feinting really does a lot of the heavy lifting for him, though. Otherwise, it's not a very flashy style, to say the least. He will take body locks to get takedowns if they present themselves. Otherwise, he seems to shoot mainly on single legs. His defense in the pocket is not great, to say the absolute least, and he can definitely have problems with his opponents when they have explosive movements in general. Moving on to Nicole, he's a pure wrestler on grappler. On the feet, I don't know how to break him down because it makes no sense. He doesn't do anything. He'll use submissions or basically any method possible to try to get the fight to the ground, but it is very predictable, so it just gets easy to kind of anticipate and counter. On the ground, he'll alternate between submissions and ground and pound to try to open stuff up, but he'll make mistakes everywhere. He'll fall off the top. He'll let you get back to your feet, lock in a sub, and pretty much anything else. A lot of people are jumping on Correa by finish or TKO here or something like that, but I feel like the reality is if you watch his fights, he fights very, very slow and methodical. He's not going to force a finish. He'll take the finish if he gets it, but he's not going to force it. So I'm going to pick Correa by decision because Nicole, despite him being not great, is kind of durable, but it definitely could be a late TKO for Correa. I'm definitely not ruling that out. Moving on to Levi Rodriguez versus Felipe Franco. I'll put up a poll for this since everyone's seen at least one fight from both of them. All right, poll is live. I'll answer some questions in the meantime. Thoughts on Ankalaev versus Anthony Smith? Anthony Smith's going to get knocked out. %86% for Franco. That's surprising. Okay. Out of all fighters on this card, who has the worst backstory? I don't know, honestly. Who do you think wins between Jacoby and Kevin Holland? Kevin Holland pulled out, so. Told you to assume a fighter would actually make a read. Yeah, I don't know at this point. Never seen Levi Rodriguez before. Yes, you did. You just don't remember. We saw him on Contender Series. You were there, so I know that you have seen him. The odds on this card are so bad. There's some serious underdogs. I get what you mean, yeah. All right, I'm going to end the poll with 74% for Franco, which is very different than the odds, to say the least. But we will get to that in a second. So, starting with Franco. Franco is mainly a grappler, but he does have some striking on the feet. He's looking to just get to the legs in any way possible, then vary how he finishes the takedown. On the ground, he'll mainly work towards subs, but he'll land a little bit of ground and pound also to open things up. He isn't overly technically sound while transitioning on the ground, though, so he will give up hip pressure, and because of that, opponents can scramble and escape sometimes. On the feet, he is just very pressure-heavy combinations. Not terrible, nothing spectacular. He does tend to swing a little bit wild, but he's at least moving his head when he does so usually, so it's not that easy to counter. In the past, he had about 7 minutes of cardio before he absolutely death-gassed, but now he's shown that he can pace himself a little better and survive the 15 minutes. He's also, again, coming into his body. People judged him a little too harshly, in my opinion, for a bad performance on Contender Series when he was very young, so I don't think he's as bad as people thought he was. Moving on to Rodriguez. Rodriguez is basically a heavy-handed kickboxer. He throws a few calf kicks at range, then he tries to open up with fast punches. He has a reasonable jab in 1-2, but generally he just wants to sling hooks and keep going until you fall. He does have one-punch knockout power in everything he throws, so he is quite dangerous. He only really uses a high guard defensively, so he can be a little bit open, especially because it's not an educated high guard. He does have reasonable takedown defense, but he definitely struggles to get off the fence. So, this is a tough one to predict because Franco is somewhat open on the feet, and we haven't seen great performance out of him, to say the least. But Rodriguez got held against the fence really easily by, what's his name? I don't even remember, but the can that he fought on Contender Series. And even though Franco lost to the guy who Rodriguez beat, the difference is that Franco was out-wrestling him with absolute ease until he death-gassed. He just couldn't find the finish. While Rodriguez did find the finish, but it was only because he was able to briefly get off the fence and open up with strikes. Until then, he was getting held there very easily. So while, of course, MMA math doesn't necessarily work, and this could be wrong, it does feel like Franco could probably get to the legs, and then probably is going to get him down because he has significantly better wrestling than the guy that Rodriguez fought. So I think that if Franco gets it down, Rodriguez hasn't necessarily displayed that he really can get back to his feet too well. So I am going to lean towards Franco getting a sub, but it is very tough to say. But I think we all are seeing the same thing. So we're all on the same page here, I do believe. All right, moving on to the first very interesting fight on the card. Jean-Paul Bosniani versus Sakyan Ko. I'll put up a poll for this. Poll is live. So far, 62% for JPL. Freddie Vidal, yeah, that guy. Great, the matchmaking. I mean, as you guys know, I don't like this fight. I think both of them are good prospects, and this feels like a fight that should happen in 2 years, not now. 55% for JPL, so definitely dropping. Please be a draw valid. Best fight on the card easily. Yeah, I agree. Hoping JPL can win valid. This is our main event. Yes. Down to 52% for JPL. Always pitting the good prospects against each other for no reason. Yeah, agreed. Ooh, 50-50 now. All right, I'm going to end the poll here at it being a literal 50-50. So, starting with Lebosniani, he is technically a grappler, but he does have one punch knockout power, and he has developed some pretty solid striking. He's very relaxed, and he kind of flows into his striking, but is fairly technical. He tries to get his distance and timing with jabs off into the body, then he'll enter with combinations. He switches stances a lot, he's good at having his hands in the right place at the right times, and he'll like sneak in kicks mid-combination where people are unlikely to know to block. He sometimes can be a little reckless when entering, and one of his bigger problems is he doesn't seem the most durable. He did have to move up a weight class because he really was not durable at 155, and even at 170, he doesn't seem crazy durable. He has spectacular submissions if the fight hits the ground, but his wrestling isn't necessarily as dominant as his submission game. Moving on to Ko. Ko is a wrestler with very heavy hands. He keeps a deep southpaw stance with his hands out to his side and his chin up. It's very, very unique to watch. He somewhat tries to use that to draw his opponent in so he can counter or get to his wrestling. He throws the left hand and the right hook extremely hard. He shoots fast double leg shots or just gets into the clinch and then has great judo throws from there. His ability to scramble for positions on the ground is extremely impressive. Usually he wants to work towards back control. He doesn't really have the most finishing ability on the ground. This was probably the hardest fight on the card for me to pick, because you could make a very cohesive argument for either of them. Ko has the better wrestling by a long shot. However, JPL has the better grappling by a long shot. So the question is, can Ko control position and not allow JPL to start working on his submission game? Or is this going to be a fight where maybe Ko is able to control the position and when the fight hits the mat, but JPL gets like one solid attack off, which either forces the fight back to the feet or just scores enough points to take the decision. On the feet, I think that JPL does have a slight advantage because Ko is actually chinnier than JPL, despite JPL not being the most durable. Like, Ko has been flatlined twice, and by not the greatest fighters. So with his hands out and his chin up especially, it kind of aggravates it even more. So of course, if he can land the left hand, he probably will put JPL away, but JPL definitely has the more nuanced stand-up with like the pocket boxing, the head kicks, and so on. So I am giving JPL a mild advantage on the feet, and I'm giving it kind of a 50-50-ish on the ground. Because of that, I'm just barely leaning to JPL to take this. The method of victory is kind of random here. I'm going to say he wins by TKO because I think he can use submissions to get back to the feet where he has a better advantage, and if he touches Ko, he's going to put him out. But this fight could go pretty much any way possible. Like, I could see anything here. But official prediction, Jean-Paul Lebosniani by TKO. All right, moving on to Austin Bashi versus Jose Delgado, putting up a poll. Poll is live. All right, so far 68% for Delgado, up to 79%. Going for Jose, hope he improves his takedown. Fair enough. Don't know why people were sleeping on Bashi so hard. Fair. Only Delgado had takedown defense. Fair. Splash Rod fight from last weekend. Change your pick if it was Ewing. Yeah, so if that fight is rebooked, I'll probably pick Ewing. That being said, He was complaining about his knee, and I did look back in other fights, and yeah, he did look much worse this night. So, well, I would still pick Ewing because of the cardio problem. I'm not as positive as everyone else is that Ewing would kill him. I still think it would be like a 29-28 close decision. All right, I'm going to end the poll here at 69% for Delgado. Okay, starting with Bashi. Bashi's pretty much a pure wrestler and grappler. On the feet, he switches stances a lot and will go to the body kick or basic 1-2s. He doesn't pretend to be a striker, so he won't stay on the feet longer than needed. In his last fight, he did actually open up a little bit more on the feet. Not positive if that's a good or a bad thing yet, but he was throwing more hooks than usual. He shoots mainly on double legs. He will shoot on a single if it opens up, though. He has good initial drive, but even if the takedown fails, he'll continue to chain it until he has dominant position. He's very willing to jump on the back and try to lock up a body triangle from there. He does it in pretty much every fight possible. He can definitely be clipped on the feet, though, because he doesn't really have any nuanced defense. Moving on to Delgado. Delgado is a flowing striker who is extremely aggressive, to say the least. All of his techniques tend to be chains. He'll pair hooks in combination moving forwards, with spinning back fist after kicks, mid-knee combos, stuff like that. Because he throws a lot of hooks, despite him being long for the weight class, sometimes faster opponents can clip him in the pocket. Now, we saw that again in the Philly fight, but I'll get to that in a second. He can be taken down due to his movements being so explosive, but he does have a solid ground game with a decent level of submission, so he hasn't been in too much danger so far. He will use a lot of kicks and try to intercept with a knee if someone is going to lower their level constantly. So, this is a weird fight because I was extremely high on Delgado until I watched the Philly fight. And he made no progress from the Wood fight to the Philly fight, and it really surprised me. I thought that he would just rein in a few things, not spam as many hooks without defense, maybe increase his head movement a little bit and be an absolute monster. But he has a lot of defensive flaws, and I haven't seen evidence that they're improving at all, especially with how many times he got taken down and clipped in his last fight. Philly is not bad, but he's also not that good either, and we saw Vinicius Oliveira just execute him despite being unlucky with breaking his toe early on. So it makes that fight look even worse for Delgado. So even though I thought I was initially going to be on Delgado, with his complete lack of takedown defense and ability to set up strikes without opening himself up completely, I'm going to have to lean towards Bashi here. I'm going to take Bashi by decision. He could definitely get put out by the knee early. I would not be surprised at all. This is another one of those very close fights. But it just feels like this matchup is kind of made for Bashi as long as he knows to not get clipped by the knee. Because Delgado is not going to provide any resistance for the takedown. And while he's able to stay safe and get up against people like Philly, that's a much tougher test against someone like Bashi. So yeah, I think Bashi's going to be able to hold him down 2, if not 3 rounds and get a decision. All right, moving on to the promo. So I put up another long shot parlay who was hit by someone who I believe isn't in this stream. If you guys are educated bettors, you are going to love this community. Basically, the tools are made for people like you. Besides the fact that it's just good to have a community around the sports betting, the algorithms have done extremely well. People are hitting a lot more long shots, and I keep evolving everything there. So the link is in the description here. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions. But seriously, if you are betting and not in the server yet, at this point, I really don't understand why, because the tools have been impressive. The newest algorithm has been up, I think, the last 4 weeks in a row now, or something ridiculous like that. All right, moving on to Tommy McMillan versus Alberto Montez. I will put up a poll here. Poll is live. W, thank you. Bashi ceiling. It's hard to say yet because we really need to see him improve his stand-up. His grappling is good. His cardio usually seems to be good. C-Rod manages to make people gasp, but otherwise it seemed good. So if he's able to improve his stand-up or get more selective about when he shoots, he could go pretty far. Why is the line moving for Tommy? We'll get there. %83 for Montez. That is definitely more than I expected. How do you think Jacoby versus Kevin would have went? Jacoby would have taken him down and knocked him out. On paper, Montez win this, but I don't know. McMillan just has plot armor. That being said, I don't know how Montez is at least minus 150. Interesting. Took Montez at minus 110. I feel like a fool. It happens. Fight of the night. Glad this isn't in the Apex valid. All right, I'll end the poll here at 80% for Montez. So, starting with Tommy. Tommy is technically a submission specialist, although he's only really been striking in the UFC so far. On the feet, he has a high-paced but rangy style where he'll keep his hands low and just lunge in with strikes. He is prone to start brawling in the pocket with hooks if his opponent wants to. He will spam knees to the body as well. He looks for submissions in pretty much any position. He's very much submission over position, I would say. His wrestling hasn't really been tested in the UFC, so it's hard to say what it is. Like, I don't think we've even really seen him shoot a takedown. I think he shot like one on Contender Series and didn't even really pursue it that much. Moving on to Montez. Montez is technically a grappler, but he tends to set up his grappling with his striking more so than his wrestling. On the feet, he's calm and fights from the outside until he has an opportunity to enter. There's a variety of kicks from the outside, from question mark kicks to spinning back kicks. Use his straight to counter or to engage on the front foot. Basically, he wants to make his opponent start shooting on him rather than him shoot on his opponent. Once they shoot, he goes for anacondas and darces constantly until he's able to find it. His main defense is mainly distance-based. Now, I'm going to give a hard warning on this fight, right? Everyone is saying Montez is free, and the more I look at this fight, I disagree completely. I'm going to pick Montez, and I'm going to pick Montez by submission. But there's a few reasons why that should not be at all a confident pick. I'm picking Montez because he's the more technical fighter, and on paper, he should win because of that. However, Tommy hits a lot harder. Tommy is a lot more durable. Tommy has much better cardio. Tommy can maintain a much higher pace. Tommy has a much longer reach. Everything attributes-wise is on Tommy's side. And we saw, what's his name? The guy that Montez was fighting last. I'm terrible with names today, but you guys know who I'm talking. Oh, Tercios, there we go. We saw Tercios have moments of success trying to overwhelm Montez. Tercios has pillow hands. Tercios absolutely sucks at everything. Tommy does not, right? If Tommy starts to swarm Montez and Montez cannot hurt him, which is a very possible scenario here, then Tommy is going to break and eventually finish Montez, because we have seen Montez fade very badly in fights before. Even on Contender Series, he was gassing before he was able to get the submission. So I'm picking Montez by sub. I think that he can hurt Tommy enough to maybe not knock him down, but get him desperate enough to shoot a takedown and then lock up the sub from there. But I will not be mildly surprised if Tommy is able to basically just put enough of a pace on Montez until he's able to break him and get the KO. All right, moving on to Tabitha Ritchie versus Fatima Klein. Putting a poll for that. Poll is live. Starting with Klein at 78%. Up to 85%. Klein is catching in body, valid. I mean, everyone knows who I'm going to pick here, so I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I'll still do the breakdown, of course, though. I think Gable wrestling is overrated in MMA because of the cage. I think Gable just sucks at everything, but we'll get to that. All right, I'll end the poll at 85% for Klein. Okay, starting with Ritchie. Ritchie is a pressure and volume oriented fighter. She continues to move forwards and blitzes constantly to push her opponent against the fence. Whenever she's throwing punches, it's in tight combinations. From there, she'll either land strikes in the clinch or start to look for a takedown rather. While her striking isn't the most technical, it is somewhat serviceable enough to provide pressure. Her ground time is mainly control. There's not really much ground and pound or submission threat. She does have pretty good anti-grappling. Fighters who have needed to take her down just haven't gotten the space to set it up too well. Of course, in her last fight, that did end up changing, but I still think the trend is towards her having good anti-grappling. Moving on to Klein, the one thing I will always introduce Klein as is a WMMA fighter who does not fight at all like a WMMA fighter. She uses a lot of footwork and stand switches while pressuring constantly. She'll throw a strong jab and throw a bunch of hard kicks from the outside. She switches up the target 4 kicks from body to head to try to get a surprise finish there. She'll throw combinations whenever she enters. She mainly shoots doubles, but will change things up to throws. On the ground, she's constantly looking for a finish with elbows into submissions. So, Klein, in a way, if I had to draw a comparison, kind of fights like Lomachenko with the style of footwork. Obviously not at the same level, but that is definitely the intention, and she mixes kicks into it very well. It is the highest WMMA skill expression I have ever seen. I'm not even exaggerating. Yeah, I think she's going to absolutely walk through Richie. I think she's going to get the TKO here. It could be a decision. Richie's kind of durable. She hasn't been finished in a long time. But I'm going to pick Klein by TKO. And I want her to see her get a highlight reel TKO here because she needs to just get pushed into a title shot. She's going to reign over this division for quite a while. All right, moving on to Chase Hooper versus Mitch Ramirez. I'll put a poll. Poll is live. 100% for Ramirez to start. Okay, that changed quickly. And congrats to Richie for the first round TKO victory. Valid. Chase Hooper being such a huge favorite seems like a recipe for disaster. Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing because you kind of have to price him that way, but at the same time, it feels stupid. Spivak beats Gable, to be honest. Yeah, for sure. Can't take Cooper or anything higher than minus 200. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Hooper's sitting at, down to 62%. All right, and in the poll here. Okay, starting with Hooper. Hooper's, of course, pretty much just a pure grappler. On the feet, he will pump out a lot of teeps and do most of his work with like basic cross counters and stuff. Sometimes he decides he needs to spam spinning back fists. I have no idea why. He really doesn't have any presence on the feet. You can kind of just walk through his shots and try to chin him because he cannot do anything to you. He has a variety of takedowns as he showed against Guida, but he definitely can struggle to control you a bit on the ground, or if you have any physicality on the feet, he is going to have problems. On the ground, he'll keep flowing and looking for submissions from there. His biggest issue is that on the feet, his distance management is terrible. Even in his older fights, he'll just run into the pocket recklessly and get clipped quite a bit. Even though it's marginally improved, it is, as I said, marginal improvement, so it's not really going to save him most of the time. Moving on to Ramirez. Ramirez is mainly a boxer. He does throw in calf kicks and takedowns as well, though. He wants to pressure forwards and throw fast combinations. He's actually quicker than most of his opponents, and he does have solid offense. The biggest issue is he's not really defensively sound anywhere. He doesn't have takedown defense or really any way of evading strikes, so even though he'll look all right usually for like the first round or round and a half, he'll eventually just get clipped and put away. He is very tough though, and he won't quit on himself, which we did see in the last fight. He fought off like 5 submission attempts basically and was able to make it to round 2 because of that. I kind of wish the talent of the two fighters here was switched, because Ramirez is an actual fighter. Hooper is not. But Ramirez doesn't really have talent, and at least Hooper has talent on the ground, even if he doesn't otherwise. So I have to pick Hooper by sub here, even though I absolutely hate it. I wish all the best to Ramirez. He seems like a really cool guy, and he really wants to do this, unlike Hooper, who just doesn't work on his stand-up at all, it seems. If Ramirez wins, I will not be at all upset that I got the prediction wrong. But yeah, I have to go chase Hooper by sub. It's just a logical pick here, in my opinion. All right, moving on to Jared Cannonier versus Christian Leroy Duncan. I'll put a poll for this. Early prediction for Davis versus Believe. That's a tough one. I'm very 50-50 on that to begin with. Mark, cold thoughts on Mercy. You know my thoughts very well. You know my day CLD prompt. Valid. Not that high on CLD, to be honest. Fair enough. Having a 10-year age advantage at 31 is insane. Agreed. Why do the Batra bros always underperform? So, Fareed is definitely better than Javid. Like, Javid, I don't know what his deal was. Not that he's terrible, but he's so defensively not sound that he would make fights that should be very one-sided, very competitive. In terms of Fareed, for some reason, he has a weird combination of just not enough power and no cardio. And you usually don't see both of those at the same time. It's usually one or the other. So he can't really get early finishes, but he also always loses round 3. It's a very weird combination. You can do a full card reaction for 29. Yeah, at the end of the stream, it will. CLD striking is actually good when he isn't spinning like an idiot. I mean, yeah. Is the rankings based on algo or based on personal thoughts? It's based on an algorithm, yeah. How good is Alexandre? He's quite good in my opinion. Do you think Batra would have beaten Ewing? After I saw that fight, I would have changed my pick to Ewing. All right. Ending the poll at 69% for CLD. Starting with CLD, CLD has a very pretty style, so to speak. He switches stances a lot. He chops kicks from the outside, uses the stance and angles to try to land stuff. He'll just basically keep spinning and make you walk into his spinning techniques if he can. He really does not like the pressure, though, because of how dynamic he is, though it does stifle a lot of his offense. He is very stupid. I mean, he will just clinch when he shouldn't, throw spinning techniques when he's being pressured on the back foot. He'll have you 90% knocked out, then decide he needs to go for a takedown or something weird. It's very strange. The movement dependence, so to speak, opens him up to just being outgunned with very basic stuff sometimes. So early in his career, he lost a fight because Petrosian was just throwing basic jabs and crosses whenever CLD tried to do something dynamic and just scored points like that. He refuses to just throw the simple techniques that are going to land, which is very frustrating to watch because he could stick to that and just finish guys very easily, only throwing the spinning techniques in when it was time to. But he makes that his main skill set, which makes it a lot easier to evade because you can anticipate it very easily. Moving on to Cannonier. Cannonier is a power puncher who has a good calf kick. He will open up with the calf kicks to force his opponent to engage. He does most of his work with basic 1-2s and combinations. He will stance switch depending on the matchup. If he's going to have trouble at range, he'll typically just try to clinch or shoot constantly. His takedowns kind of suck, honestly, but if he can get you to the ground, he'll look for heavy ground and pound from there. His defense on the feet is very questionable. He just relies on being to outgun his opponent, but because of that, he's gotten rocked in like pretty much all of his last fights. So CLD is just so annoying because he should be a free pick in every fight, but he manages to make it extremely stressful. Like, I don't know how he doesn't finish some of the opponents that he fights. Like, he should be finishing them within a round a lot of the time. However, Cannonier gets rocked by air at this point, and he also doesn't have great defense. The CLD should knock him out, even though I say that every time, and then CLD doesn't knock them out. But I'm going to pick CLD by TKO either way. It's the logical pick here. Maybe he holds Cannonier against the fence for 3 rounds. I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think Jared's very good. He's just kind of a power merchant who has relied on attributes that are definitely fading now. How would Prime Cannonier do against CLD? I still think CLD would knock him out, but I am actually more confident than most people are that CLD will win the fight. It's just the method I'm not very confident in. Because Jared is just like, at this point, I don't even know what he's doing. He should have been able to beat MVP. He just made a lot of really dumb decisions and just showed he had no striking defense whatsoever. All right, moving on to the main event. Dricus Du Plessis versus Kamaru Usman. I'll put a poll for this. Poll is live. Appreciated, GTA Crusaders. Yeah. How good was the prime Chris Weidman? He was pretty good. Have you been watching World Cup? On and off. I don't watch it consistently. I may be African, but I ain't no brother of your son. That was a good line. 67% for DDP so far. Thoughts on Damian Anderson versus Ezra Elliott that was just added to the card? I don't really know them, so I couldn't tell you. Prime Usman or DDP? I think Usman by 50-45 decision. We'll get to that. All right, I'm going to end the poll at 70% for DDP here. So starting with DDP, he's a well-rounded fighter, but he's actually a little bit difficult to break down because of the fact that his entire style really depends on the weaknesses of his opponent. He's very willing to completely change things up depending on who he's fighting. Generally speaking, he likes to kick a bunch on the outside, then he'll start to time his blitzes of overhands chained together. He'll chain his combinations into takedowns in an awkward way where he kind of just falls into his opponent, but it works because they're trying to defend his punches while he does that. On the ground, he is extremely aggressive, generally wants to work towards a submission if possible. Because his style is a little bit erratic, he definitely can be taken down or countered fairly easily at times, but when he needs to be more defensively sound, he tends to be able to pull it out, even though it's a little sketchy. Moving on to Usman. Usman is a wrestler with a good jab. The majority of his striking game really is his jab, in all honesty. If he's not throwing a jab, he tends to throw a few hooks in combination. Every once in a while, he'll put together the 1-2 and such, but it's not as frequent. He shoots on fast blast double legs. If he can't get the takedown, he'll hold his opponent against the fence and do some damage in the clinch there. On the ground, he has solid control, but doesn't really do the most damage. His striking really seems to have degraded a lot. There's no real nuance now, and he's not as defensively sound. If you look at the exchanges on the feet in the Buckley fight, they were like kind of scary. The point I was thinking, if he had actually been fighting Bilal like people thought it was going to be, he might have actually gotten TKO'd. Since he's not comfortable just pushing the pace constantly now, it's definitely gotten easier for opponents to hit him because of that, because he's just not constantly throwing you off balance and such. So, an issue that Usman has always had throughout his career is that he really struggles when he cannot impose his own pace and his opponent is willing to be chaotic. If you look at the Colby Covington fights, Usman got hurt many times throughout both of those fights, and that's really just because Colby was willing to stay in his face and just keep throwing. Like, Colby doesn't have crazy technical striking, nor does he have any power, and he was still very close to winning both fights. Now, of course, Colby does have solid anti-wrestling, so it is a circumstance where he could probably open up a little bit more than some of the other opponents that Usman has had. But even in the Leon fights, in the second Leon fight, just because Usman didn't trust himself to blind pressure, Leon was able to pick at him very easily with the kicks. So the question in this fight is Usman either going to be able to immediately take Dricus down and hold him there, or can Usman constantly pressure Dricus back to the fence and just maintain his pace throughout the full 25 minutes? I just don't think either is going to happen. Because even if Usman is going to be able to get takedowns here, which he might, Dricus has had 2 wrestling camps in a row. Chimaev is a much better wrestler than Usman, and more importantly, Chimaev is a much better grappler than Usman. So Chimaev is going to be able to hold you down. He's going to put hooks in. He's going to do stuff like that. If Dricus gives his back up to Usman, Usman's basically just going to let him turtle and stand up. Like, Usman doesn't really have a way of defending against that. I also don't think that Usman's going to be able to use his normal pressure because DDP is going to be so physical compared to his previous opponents. So DDP is going to be able to just clash in the center, just spam the overhands and probably eat the jabs if he needs to. So I'm expecting Dricus's wrestling and grappling to look a lot better than people are expecting, because despite what people think after his last fight, he does have genuine BJJ. He does have guillotine wins against reasonable level opponents, and he was able to almost get a Darce against Whitaker. So, like, it does show what he is capable of if he's able to get a single moment to snatch stuff up. Obviously, against Chimaev, maybe not the best idea to pull guillotine. I wasn't a fan of that. You guys heard my whole rant about it. But in this fight, I do think that Usman is going to get worn on and start getting pieced up on the feet and start taking increasingly bad shots. And I think he's eventually going to take a shot bad enough that he ends up in a standing guillotine and gets finished from there. So I'm going to pick Dricus by submission, and I am specifically saying I think it is going to be a guillotine. If DDP wins, people would just say Usman is washed. DDP is a nightmare matchup for Prime, in my opinion. Yeah, I agree. I think he's too chaotic. All right, moving on to the last promo. As you guys see, there's 2 long shots here that users hit for us. One from 3 weeks ago, I guess now, and one from last week. Person is still in the chat, I think, if you want to talk to him. If you guys are educated bettors, which most of you probably are if you're willing to watch a full hour analysis of this stuff, you guys are going to like the tools and the community that we have here. Link is in the description. Feel free to DM me with any questions. Only $25 a month, unlike a lot of other handicappers. And we have pretty much the strongest tools in the UFC space, in my opinion. All right, getting to a few questions, and then we'll move on to the recap of last fight, or last event. And DDP just had the wrong game plan against Chimaev. Yeah, I agree with that. Why couldn't DDP get up from, I assume you mean Chimaev, when Sean was able to? Yeah, DDP ragdoll Sean. Is there an explanation for that? So Sean doesn't have the greatest, oh, he does have pretty good, but he doesn't have absolutely insane takedown defense. But what Sean does have is a BJJ background, where he's been doing that since he was pretty young, and the ability to scramble back to his feet constantly. So Dricus has a more improvised BJJ, where he might use more submissions now, but he doesn't have the same level of scrambling ability. DDP was able to get Sean down, but he was never able to hold him down for more than a few seconds because of that. Why do you think no one calls out Gregor the same way they call out Gable? Oh, probably just because there's a difference in the clarity of the cases, realistically. Like, everyone can have their own opinions, but I think one is a little murkier than the other. But I wouldn't say that no one calls out McGregor. He gets a lot of hate for it. Favorite part about Dricus is that he will work all levels of the body so well. Genuinely one of the most underrated strikers in the modern era. Improvements he makes fight to fight. Yeah, I mean, he definitely improved significantly. DDP is 33-0 in kickboxing with 30 KOs. He has legitimate experience. Yeah, true. Does BSD have the worst fight IQ in the UFC? All right, let's get to the breakdown from last week, or the recap, I should say. So starting with Alessandro Costa versus Cody Durden. I actually didn't see this full fight. I kind of watched part of it back. But yeah, Cody Durden's not UFC quality. Just get him out of here. It's getting stupid. Costa's fine. He's good. Just done with Durden. Gondra versus Reese. Yeah, Reese has no fight IQ, and it's crazy because he has a lot of potential, but the fight went basically as I expected. Like, Gondra has a lot of power. Reese is going to overextend and not defend well. Gondra by TKO is kind of obvious here, unfortunately, even though I've been very high on Reese in the past. Basharat versus Garza. I had Garza winning rounds 2 and 3. Not that they weren't close rounds, but I did think he took both of them. Basharat, again, as we talked about earlier, really did just fade heavily and doesn't have the power to put people away early. Whether it was the knee issue or not still remains to be seen, but it was not a good look of a performance. Garza needs to develop a little more. I actually kind of wish he went back to the regional scene for a few more fights, even though he will be in the UFC now, because he has potential, but he's not ready. He doesn't know how to close the distance properly. But I do think he has a future. Okay, yeah. Moving on to Damian versus Cesar Almeida. So, yeah, I mean, neither of them are very good. This fight went kind of like how I expected, where, again, I mentioned that Cesar holds the high guard like it's kickboxing, and will just let strikes go right in between. We saw him get knocked out because of that. But Damian really did not understand how to close distance for a lot of the fight. Cesar had to make a very big mistake, and he was kind of getting pieced up by the volume of Cesar. So, I don't know, Damian has a lot of growth to do. He has time, to be fair, but it was not a good performance in my opinion. Cesar is pretty much done. I mean, they could give him like a low-level fight, or they're more likely they'll just feed him to some prospect, but he has no real chance going forwards. Tracy Cortez versus Wong Thong. So, Wong should have gotten a TKO here, in my opinion, like multiple times. She had the calf completely fried, she had the body fried at times, and she had Cortez rocked at times. We kind of knew, again, as I was calling out, the footwork difference was going to be too much. Tracy wasn't going to be able to set up her shots, and the boxing difference on the feet is astronomical. But I really wanted to see Wong go aggressive for a finish once she knew that Tracy really was not a threat to her. I am a little bit disappointed that she didn't go for the finish in round 3, but it is what it is. Luke Riley versus Kai Kamaka. So this did show that Riley still definitely has a massive weakness when it comes to the calf kick. He did not really defend any calf kicks for like the first minute and a half, and his leg was getting chewed up. He did start moving the leg finally, but a better fighter could definitely take advantage of that. I did think the stoppage was just slightly premature. I don't need to see Kamaka get flatlined, but at the same time, like, he was trying to clinch, he was trying to fight back. I think it is a little bit premature because of that. But Riley got the TKO like I expected. He was just a little bit too fast and powerful for Kamaka. It's just a different level of talent, realistically. But yeah, so we got that one right. Moving on. Yanez versus Garbrandt. I mean, this fight went exactly like we were saying, right? Yanez doesn't have great defense. He was getting tagged up early. Cody doesn't have any defense at this point, so he got flatlined. Like, Cody's got to retire. It's just getting ridiculous. Yanez isn't a bad fighter by any means. It's just, he really needs to improve his defense. Like, it's really holding him back because he has solid offense. All right, Gable Stevenson versus Alicia Ellison. Yeah, this was a really embarrassing performance for Gable. Like, Ellison is someone you should be taking out within the first 30 seconds, realistically. To get the takedown stuffed is a really bad look. Ellison like threatened the guillotine and then just defended the takedown easily, which is not what you want to see from someone whose wrestling is supposed to be wildly dominant. Gable is extremely athletic, I will say that. You don't see heavyweights kicking like that usually. But other than that, it's like, dude, you're just winging wild strikes with no setup and just praying you're going to flatline him. And you're taking strikes in the process. Like, he ate an elbow that seemed like it had him rocked at one point. It was just not what you'd want to see out of someone who's supposed to be this amazing prospect. Obviously, he has some time, but he's not even like that wildly young where it's like, oh, he's going to be a menace in his prime. Like, his prime is a few years away. So I don't know about that. I think that he'll probably like execute Derek Lewis or Tai Tuivasa in his next fight. But then after that, he's going to have a very hard time. All right, moving on to Nikita Krylov versus Robert Whittaker. So I will say two things about this. Even though it was on paper a very good matchup for Whittaker, it also made me think that Whittaker's really going to struggle at 205 because Whittaker was landing clean repetitively and just had no impact for like 2.5 rounds, which is not what you want to see because it's not like Nikita's a crazy durable guy either. Like Whittaker was obviously the better fighter. Besides the physicality advantage that Nikita had early with holding him down, yeah, Whittaker was able to just move around, do what he wanted to do on the feet. But you can't not be putting these guys away because they will put you away if they hit you. So I can't see Whittaker going that far in this division, even though he's going to have the technical striking advantage over a lot of these guys. All right, moving on to Bobby Green versus Terrence McKinney. So, yeah, I mean, as I was saying, this is basically a 50-50 fight. Either McKinney kills him in under half a round or he'll die right after. A lot of people were saying it was rigged, that like the body strike only clipped the elbow. When a fighter is really gassed, they can get touched by anything to the body and it will just make them fold. That's basically what happened. McKinney was done once he couldn't get the finish there. Very low fight IQ, honestly, to not get the finish because he just had to keep striking, but for some reason wanted to go for the submission instead. But yeah, McKinney proves again that he can't handle any step up in competition, and Bobby's not going to be put away that easily if you don't use your brain at least a little bit. Moving on to Loney Kavanaugh versus Brandon Royval. So this was the first, like, what are we doing fight IQ situation of this card, because Kavanaugh should have put him away, right? First round, we see some improvements out of Royval. Full respect to that, right? His striking defense looked a little better. He wasn't overextending as wildly when he was trying to use his volume. He was also pushing forwards, which he should be doing with his style. Kavanaugh, for some reason, was voluntarily backing up. I don't know why. And also started pulling the guillotine, which made no sense to me. I really don't know why you'd pull guillotine against a grappler like Royval, especially when you do have the advantage on the feet. But yeah, going into round 2, Kavanaugh finally realizes, yes, his striking defense, while improved, still kind of sucks. Let me just counter him and put him down, which worked just fine. Then decides he needs to follow him to the ground, isn't able to get the finish because of that, and goes back to pulling guillotines. So, again, Kavanaugh really did this to himself, because all he had to do was be disciplined with the counters and not pull guillotine, because he was stuffing the initial takedown. It's not like Royval just spawns crazy wrestling out of nowhere. Like, Kavanaugh would stuff the takedown, be perfectly fine, then be like, oh, let me like get guillotine and pull now. It's fine if you want to threaten the standing guillotine. I think there's reason to argue to do that, but you should not be pulling guillotine unless, first of all, you 100% have it, and second of all, you just shouldn't be doing it all when you know that you're not going to have the advantage on the ground. So, very disappointing performance from Kavanaugh. He still has a lot of ability, but that was just embarrassing. Sandhagen versus Mario Bautista. I mean, this went basically as I expected, right? Like, Sandhagen is the better fighter. It doesn't matter, though, because he just has weird lapses in judgment, can't handle pressure, and just isn't tough or disciplined enough to win at this level. Bautista was behind in round 1, but just decided, I'm just going to go after him, put volume on him, and that opened up the takedown and the Suliev stretch, which ended up popping Corey's knee. Round 2, Corey being the better fighter just ended up working for that round. Plus, I think Mario was actually a little gassed from the Suliev stretch. That submission takes a lot more energy than people realize, so I think him cranking on it really did like slow him down. He did need to take a bit of a round to recover. Round 3, again, Corey, hypothetically better fighter, Mario just decided he's going to go after him and try to take him out. Is able to knock him down and, of course, just ragdolled him the rest of the round. As I said in my stories, and people had mixed opinions about, but I do think that Corey is better off transitioning into the role of a coach because he has a lot of technical understanding of the game. His ability to implement it is just very bad, though, because he's a tactician. He's not a fighter. So he could go up to 145, try to start over there. I think that he should transition sooner rather than later, though, to coaching because he will have a better time and probably make more money there, realistically speaking. Okay, moving on to the most embarrassing fight IQ moment of this card. I told you guys last week, the only way BSD loses this is if he shoots a double leg and gets guillotined. And what do you know? Immediately decides to run across the octagon, shoot a double leg, and get guillotined. People were asking me if this was because of him or Nicholas. I have no idea. Like, well, it would be hard for me to imagine that Nicholas game plan to shoot a double leg here. I also don't think BSD just decided out of nowhere he was going to shoot a double leg here. So, I don't know whose stupidity this was, but he basically chose the only path that he could lose this fight. I just don't understand it. Like, if I'm able to put in my notes when studying this fight for some time, not nearly as long as his coaches, that the only thing you have to do is avoid shooting a double leg, I just really cannot understand why you would shoot the double leg. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those fights where I'm like, what are we doing? How can, like, and I don't think I was the only person to come to this conclusion, right? Like, how are regular analysts and fans doing a better job of making your game plan and understanding how you should fight than you are? So I just had no words for this scenario. Like, I still don't think Paddy is very good, to be honest. I think if BSD just kept it standing, if he just worked in the clinch and used his elbows, he would have been fine. But yeah, I mean, he just throws away what was actually a good matchup for him, so it's what it is. I mean, oh well. Alright, moving on to the non-fight of McGregor versus Holloway. So, there's the question, did he come in injured? If not, what the hell happened? I do believe him that he didn't come in injured. And the reason why I believe that, despite what people are saying about the walkout, is because you don't throw a kick like that if you came in injured, and you know you're injured. I do think that he thought he could do it. We saw him in the back practicing that kick. So it's not like it just... Yeah, I just don't think that he had an injury that he was just straight up hiding or something like that. However, there was something a little weird about the kick, in that when you miss a kick like that, what you're supposed to do is just follow through completely and turn around and then either spin out of it, switch stances, something like that. Now, while this isn't normal, and this was definitely a combination of bad luck, his body being weak, etc., it seemed like what caused the damage was the fact that he threw the kick, and then while he was in the air, he tried to retract his leg instead of just turning all the way through. You could do that with a weaker round kick. You can't do that with like a jump round kick with 100% of your body weight. It just doesn't work. So I think this was also a little bit of an issue of people will practice landing their strikes. What they won't practice is missing their strikes. And missing your strikes sometimes has a much more significant impact than landing your strikes. So something for you guys who are fighting, make sure that if you are going to throw a strike in your fight, you know how it feels to miss that strike at full power, because you can definitely mess with your body by doing so. But other than that, there's really nothing to say about this fight. We saw literally nothing. Very disappointing from an analyst perspective, because I wanted to see if my reads about the fight were going to be right. Whether McGregor was going to win, lose in embarrassing fashion, whatever it was, I wanted it to be an actual fight, and so that we could draw some conclusions from it, but we got literally nothing. So that is what it is. Worst ending in that sense. BSD had one job and still somehow failed. Yeah, I don't know. BSD or Justin. And BSD has the skill set to win, but with that fight IQ, I mean, I don't know, he'd probably get himself knocked out. How bad would Ilya nuke Paddy? Oh, very badly. I think people just want a conspiracy, but the more likely scenario is Conor McGregor is made out of glass, 5 years out of fighting. Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of lower body injuries, so it's not shocking that he got a new one. W Octagon lesson, thank you. Worst ending in main event history? Probably, yeah. Who you got, Ankalaev or Guskov? Ankalaev, probably. BSD versus Rufi rematch, who you got? I still think Rufi struggles with that style, so I'd still probably take BSD, but it's a tough one. Thoughts on Van versus Pantoja? Watched back Pantoja's title fights and his striking is concerned, to say the least. Yeah, I think Van would probably TKO him in round 4. And the reason why I say that is Pantoja fights in on and off rounds. He'll fight hard round 1, take round 2 off, fight hard round 3, take round 4 off, etc. It's a style of fighting where even if he can't get the finish, he's able to kind of secure the 48-47 wins. However, against Van, I think needing that 4th round to recover is going to be a problem. Because unless Pantoja can just ragdoll Van early, which is possible, but unless he can do that, then the body strikes and the volume is just going to add up and probably finish Pantoja at that point. With France out of the World Cup and BST doing that, do we just get rid of France at this point? It's not a good look for France, yeah. Do you think Rufy being with Volk, though, changes that? I don't think it makes a massive difference, to be honest. You see Ezra Elliott fight add to card. I saw that, I just don't know the fighter, so I can't really break it down. Tyra or Loner. Now I'd probably lean Tyra. Do you think more people should do the Pantoja on-off round strategy? I think it really depends on your style, because you need to have a style where you're very aggressive in your on-rounds for it to work. But for fighters like that, yeah, I do think that there's a reasonable argument that they should try it. Alright guys, I think I'm probably going to wrap things up here. Bit of a quicker stream, but there also was not much content in this card, to say the least. I'll see if I could get some thoughts on the new fight, and that will of course be in the server. So if you guys have not joined yet, I already did the promos, but do consider joining. Link is in the description here. Feel free to DM me on Instagram with any questions. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a good night. Enjoy the event if you are watching. Good luck on your bets, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, guys.